People who have reached a 9 or 10 on the pain scale, what happened? Story 1. Had a CAT scan at 36. They gave me IV contrast fluid. Told me I might feel like I had to pee. No big deal. Make sure to hold still. Put me in the machine. Within a minute, I started feeling warm. As they started the scan, I started breathing heavily. Then I started screaming. It felt like my entire body was on fire. Every nerve. They were confused and freaked out. Got me out and sat up, but it wasn't until a nurse gave me a shot of Benadryl that I started to feel better. Turns out I had a full-body internal allergic reaction to the contrast media, which contained iodine. Never happened before. The worst feeling of my life. After it happened, I swear I looked all over the internet and couldn't find any good information on the reaction. But there are apparently hundreds of people who have had it or know about it. It's terrifying. I'm so sorry for those of you who have lost loved ones this way. I could not handle IV potassium. The nurse told me she was going to push it very slowly and with a lot of saline, and it still felt like my entire arm was on fire and the fire was spreading. So she flushed with pure saline, then started pushing the potassium slower and with more saline. Still had me screaming. Finally, after about 15 minutes of pushing the meds at the slowest pace possible, she asked if I would rather take a pill instead. So she shows up with the pill, a big-ass pill. I'm staring at it and wondering how successful rescuing a choking patient would be at the height of COVID with bare staff. So I decided to break it apart, tossed half in my mouth and couldn't get it past my throat. Took a few panicked moments before I finally forced it down. I start working up the courage to choke on the next piece, and the nurse walks back in and tells me I can just dissolve it in water and drink it. CT technologist here. I think it's important to point out that an allergy to iodine is not what caused your reaction. Iodine is stored in the thyroid gland, and no human is allergic to iodine. That's not to say that you can't be allergic to substances containing iodine, but it isn't the iodine that caused your reaction. It was something else in the medication, food, skin prep, etc. that caused that reaction. Could be a preservative or any number of things depending on what you injected or injected when you had the reaction. The only contraindication to IV contrast dye is a prior allergic reaction to contrast dye, which is what OP had, but don't confuse a reaction to iodine, seafood, or some other iodine-containing substances with IV contrast dye. This is important because unless you are specifically allergic to contrast dye, having a CT in an emergent situation just might save your life. Story 2. Tried to give birth vaginally, and after hours of labor and hours of pushing, something felt horribly wrong. Then it felt like the worst pain imaginable. Ended up having an emergency C-section, but something went wrong with the drugs, and I could feel the incision. My uterus had literally burst. After closing, the doctor was checking to make sure my uterus was solid and it had multiple other tears. I almost bled out. The doctor cried, telling my boyfriend what had happened. Had my water break, and then stayed in labor for many hours. I kept telling the med staff I was in a lot of pain, but I wasn't taken seriously and was told I was overreacting and that labor is supposed to be painful. Then, the baby finally came, but got stuck, and I had third-degree tearing and an episiotomy. I nearly bled out also. Because my water broke so long before the baby came, I had an infection and was septic, and ended up back in the hospital 2 weeks later. It was awful. I didn't know any better at the time, but I'm pretty sure the whole thing was horribly mismanaged. I am pregnant again 8 years later, and my new OB is unable to find my original records. I had a baby on Wednesday, and yesterday during shift transfer, I heard one attending nurse tell the other that I had a repeat C-section with bilateral tubal ligation. I did? 'Cause swear to you I talked about getting the Paragard for my 6-week checkup, but never discussed permanent BC. Turns out someone said this and the nurses just kept repeating it to the next shift nurse until eventually they weren't even reading me comparing notes, just telling each other I've had a bilateral tubal. The second time I was coming out on anesthesia and apparently freaked the hell out after the push again, and that's when they noticed my notes. I have no memory of this. A friend was there and told me. The third, it was said before they pushed it, but it was ordered and drawn up, and I was like, hey, please freaking do not. I don't know what the deal was. I think it's because I was 18 and alone at a hospital, so many of them were like, nobody gives a crap. Also, it was for vomiting/nausea. There were like a million different choices. I don't get why this was their favorite one. I also woke up from my anesthesia during my surgery during that stay and had a full-on conversation with them about how much discomfort I was in, and they kept saying, yes, in a minute. Yes, soon somebody will help you, while I could feel them working on me. I got really frustrated, and you can't see much but the slits of light that the tape allows, and I finally moved because it hurt so bad and I got screamed at by the doctor, and they immediately put me back under. The whole experience was messed up. Almost the same thing here. Pushed until I was telling my husband my last wishes and to take care of the baby. Cut and torn and baby half-in/crowning. They rushed me to surgery and cut hip bone to hip bone. I felt every pull of the scalpel, lost his heartbeat. Doctor was on the table to pull him, my uterus and surrounding bits out. The baby was blue, and they ran off with him but told me he was okay. Damn curtain. I finally gave in to the pain and was in and out, but we are both healthy almost 14 years later. He's an only child. 12 out of 10 do not recommend. Story 3. Ovarian cyst burst. I would have tried to call a morgue to book a reservation. The only full sentence I could think of during that entire episode was, the human body is not meant to survive this. Yeah, that was a red flag moment in my brain. I deal with a lot of pain, endometriosis here, but I knew something was absolutely not right the second that happened. My stomach bloated so fast and so quickly because of the internal bleeding that I looked pregnant within a minute. Not even kidding. My husband was with me and witnessed it all and looked horrified. He's an EMT, so I was a bit disturbed when I saw his face. It was like 1 a.m. and I was so used to being treated so poorly by doctors I didn't want to go. Also, I literally couldn't even move. I had to pee, and it took every ounce of will in me I had to even move. My husband offered to move me himself. Was bloated like that for probably close to a week before it was back down. It hurts to cough, it hurts to laugh, etc. Also, the crappy nurse assumed I was drug-seeking when I showed up at the ER after urgent care sent me there 20 hours later when I forced myself to go to the doctor because I was faint. She blew my veins trying to get an IV, and then I was made to do an internal ultrasound in which I cried silently, and the tech actually stopped and told the doc they wouldn't continue. Finally, the MRI/CAT, the one with the iodine, revealed it, and the nurse was clearly embarrassed when they told me something was indeed wrong. Yeah, no crap. I can't move without my body feeling like it was struck by lightning or I've been impaled. Dude, it was bad. It's a bit validating to see so many people saying how bad it actually hurts. Mine was in the process of rupturing, that or infected. I had been running a fever, nausea, and vomiting, bleeding through multiple tampons an hour, the worst cramps I've ever had, and would get pains that made me almost pass out for over a week. I had stage 4 endometriosis. It turned out my reproductive organs were covered in necrosis. I had a 7-centimeter cyst that was covering one ovary, the one causing the flu-like symptoms, and a cluster of small cysts hiding between my other ovary and intestines. Sometimes when I would go to the bathroom, the cysts that were between my ovary and intestine, when they were inflamed or aggravated, would get squeezed by my bowels moving. I would turn ghost white. My ears would ring, my chest would start pounding all the way up to my ears. It felt like a red-hot poker was stabbing my abdomen. I would get super nauseous. I became very faint and dizzy, and sometimes I almost passed out. I may even have once or twice. I also used to have cluster headaches for about 2 decades, and I can verify that ovarian cysts can absolutely be just as painful as cluster headaches. I would say both qualify as an 11 out of 10 on the pain scale. It felt like I was going to die. Story 4. Bacterial meningitis. My brain felt like a contained explosion that was trapped reverberating in my skull, but it wanted out and constantly let me know about it. Didn't have bacteria, but I had viral meningitis, and the headache combined with neck pain and light sensitivity was just god-awful, and that lasted weeks. I felt lucky it wasn't bacterial, but spent the weekend in the hospital and then a long and slow recovery at home. Was no joke. I had viral meningitis, and the hallmark for me was that when I bent over I could feel my brain touching the front of my skull. I was relaying all of my symptoms to my husband. He's a doctor. And finally, when my headache was at level 10 at 2 a.m., we went to the emergency room. They refused to give me pain meds for hours until they finally did a spinal tap and confirmed my diagnosis. I will never forget the sensation of my brain moving. Truly awful. To help anyone trying to calibrate, my wife had bacterial meningitis. The pain reached a 10 level following a misdiagnosis by a 999 paramedic who was no longer allowed to visit people on his own until after additional training at least, who told us it wasn't, and to look out for a purple rash that rapidly spreads across the body. Spoiler, bacterial meningitis often has no rash. After 3 hours, we called 999 again. They said they'd send an ambulance. It didn't come for 45 minutes, so we got my wife's mom to get her and to take her to the hospital. This whole time, the meningitis surrounding my wife's brain and spine were under attack from bacteria and swelling, causing 10-level pain. By comparison, giving birth to a 10-pound baby with no pain medication because of poor care by NHS nurses, who were subsequently insulted by their senior/boss in the lift as we headed down to the complications floor, whilst they discussed quitting the profession because of how understaffed the hospital was after 20 hours of labor, is apparently a 9. I consider myself lucky. I woke up with an inability to hold anything down, even water, and a growing headache plus nausea. So I went to the local walk-in clinic, and the doctor had zero idea, but she insisted I go to the ER. I listened, and they also didn't know what it was, so they admitted me for observation. By the following morning, I was in so much pain I just begged the staff for morphine or to just kill me, freaking out my girlfriend who stuck around. Eventually, a doc made rounds and lost his crap when he saw me, cordoned off the wing, the works. They stuck me with potent drugs that burned going in, but I blacked out. I woke up 3 days later with my left eye bulging out of my skull, my left hand puffed up and spotted so much I couldn't use it, and my left foot much the same. Staff said I was lucky they didn't have to amputate. That was in 2003, and to this day my left side has issues from it, still. So if that first doc hadn't been humble and prudent, or that second doc observant, I'd be dead. Story 5. Molar infection. The pain was so intense I had to control myself to not just curl into a ball and cry. I had to take antibiotics for a week and then extract the tooth. It's like the most intense nerve pain ever, but it doesn't stop. No thinking, no sleeping, only the pain. Now I say I no longer am afraid of death, since death can be a release from pain. I can relate to the no thinking, no sleeping part. I got an impacted wisdom tooth removed, and then the swelling got so severe that the stitches became undone. The wound got infected within 24 hours. I was in so much pain that I couldn't think or sleep. I would sit up and stare at the wall during the day and do the same thing during the night, except I would occasionally drift in and out of sleep from pure exhaustion. This went on for a week because when my wife called the dentist, they said this was normal, even though I was bleeding non-stop. I got my wife to demand an emergency appointment, and when I got there, they were like, "Oops, this is super infected." The infection was gone after 1 week on antibiotics, and then there were a couple of weeks before I could eat and sleep normally. I lost so much weight, I could still sometimes feel a strange sensation in my jaw 1 year later. Let's just say I've been through similar pain. My single biggest regret in life is not taking care of my teeth when I was younger. Dental issues are serious, people. If you have badly infected teeth, it can cause fatal cardiac issues and prevent you from getting other types of life-saving surgery. You don't want to reach the, "Hey, you'd better take care of all of this, or you're going to die" level of dental issues, because I promise you, it is the 9th circle of hell. Plus, you'll still have to fix it, and by then, it'll be way more expensive, I assure you. Please, no matter your age, your financial situation, or your busy schedule, do everything you can in life to prioritize your teeth. Brush twice a day, floss every night, stop lying to your dentist about this and really do it, and use a fluoride mouthwash. This will take you a grand total of like 7 minutes each day. You will find out sooner or later that it's worth the 7 minutes. Don't skimp on it. Don't cut corners, just clean your teeth, and go in for the twice yearly cleanings. Schedule the next one on your way out. Just do it. I had sudden molar pain the week of the first lockdown. My dentist was so upset that he would have been able to fix it easily, but he wasn't legally allowed to open it. After a few nights of pain, I went to A&D, but the doctor wouldn't see me as it was a dental issue. I second what you said about not thinking or sleeping, etc. It was all-consuming, wretched pain. I was in a a terrible state. My dentist referred me to the only emergency dentist in the county who just extracted the offending tooth. I don't think I've ever felt such relief. Story 6. Had tubes in my ears as a kid. When I was 6, our new family doctor told me that the tubes had fallen out and that I could shower/bathe, etc. without my earplugs from then on. Mom was skeptical, so she just washed my hair in the sink that night just to make sure everything was okay. Everything was not okay. I woke up in the middle of the night screaming bloody murder because it felt like someone had stabbed me in the head with 1,000 knives and then set them on fire. Mom rushed me to the hospital where I had to have emergency surgery to remove the tubes that were still very much in my ears. Thanks to Dr. Dumb, I had gotten water behind my eardrums, which had rapidly become severely infected. Thank God my mom has always been one to err on the side of caution and didn't let me have a full shower or a bath that night, or it could have potentially killed me. Severe infections near the brain aren't ideal. I'm 34 now and I still remember the pain vividly. I had these, didn't fall out, but when they came to remove them, one of them wouldn't come out. Despite the fact that I was 6 or 7 and bawling, they kept trying again and again. Felt like someone trying to rip my brain out through my ear. They took them out while you were awake? I had these as a kid and a doctor tried to take them out while I was awake and my mom flipped out. Found a second doctor who said having them taken out while awake is absolutely insane. As beyond the pain it causes, it could also cause deafness or other hearing damage if the conscious patient moves wrong, and likely will due to the pain. I ended up getting them out through surgery, which gave me lifelong trauma. So you win some, you lose some. I'm not a doctor, so I won't pretend to give medical reasons, but I'm a medical coder, and I code tube placements for any myringotomies almost every day. I translate the operative report into shorthand codes for insurance to pay. There are 2 codes for tube placement, one with and one without anesthesia. It'd be very unusual for me to see a case that doesn't use anesthesia because I primarily bill for anesthesiologists, not EENT docs. Nevertheless, I believe there are situations where it's not only possible but medically advisable not to use anesthesia for tube placement or removal. Certainly the AMA thought it was a common enough procedure to give tube placement or removal without anesthesia its own code. Story 7. Trigeminal neuralgia. It feels like every bone and tooth in my face has been crushed and shattered. I've got a high pain tolerance from a lifetime of nerve damage from scoliosis, but TN pain had me truly wishing for the relief of death. Absolutely nothing gave me any relief whatsoever, and I was begging to just be sedated. Looking for this one, it felt like an electrified hot searing knife was being pushed into my tooth or jaw. My face swelled and went red, and the pain was all the way down my neck and collarbone. There's a reason they call it the suicide disease. I have TN as well. It's so difficult to explain to people who haven't experienced that pain what it feels like. It's also one of those invisible things, or what to call it, so more often than not, people assume I exaggerate how painful it is. It's a freaking nightmare, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Not knowing when it'll flare up or what will trigger the pain makes life unbearable at times. In my case, no meds or anything have helped. It's basically a you have to learn with this type of situation. I have something related to this, nerve damage in my nose from a botched surgery. Now I get pain almost daily. At first, it was the worst pain in my life. The doctors can't find anything and think it's the trigeminal nerve. It goes throughout your face. Gabapentin is the only thing that helps me. If you still get the pain, I highly recommend gabapentin. It's like a miracle drug for me. I wouldn't say I have a particularly high pain tolerance, but having leukemia, I've had some painful experiences, but only once has it ever actually crossed my mind that I'd rather just die. It was a really nasty bout of food poisoning. Left me incapacitated on a dirty gas station bathroom floor. About 90 minutes of violent puking and pooping until I couldn't lift myself off the floor anymore. I have never experienced exhaustion like that. The gas station employees finally called the cops. I reckon they thought I was withdrawing from heroin. They stretchered me out and put me in the ambulance where I continued to retch and puke up nothing more than a tablespoon of bile. It was at that time that it crossed my mind that I'd be fine with just dying. Everything hurts. Not a good time. Story 8. I have thankfully been exceedingly lucky in not gravely injuring myself. However, the most egregious amount of pain I've ever been in was getting stung by a stingray. I wasn't paying attention and moving quickly through the shallow ocean and felt a slice. I thought I'd stepped on glass, but by the time I got out of the water, the pain was so intense I couldn't even think. Felt like someone put my foot in a blender. I got treated quickly and thankfully did not go through the peak of it. For future reference, submerge affective areas in the hottest water you can stand without burning yourself. The same thing happened to me in Costa Rica. I had no idea what to do, but luckily the locals did and brought me to a kitchen where they happened to be boiling water and had me submerge my foot. The boiling water was soothing to the searing pain that occurred from the stingray barb. I was stung by a stingray in Costa Rica. The pain was a 9 on a 10 scale. It was excruciating and I passed out and went into shock. Some locals helped by immersing my foot in super hot water and pouring candle wax on it over and over. In between the candle wax strips, they used vodka to disinfect the wound. The strange thing is that I knew to do the stingray shuffle, but I was boogie boarding and it stung me when I jumped off the boogie board. I jumped right onto the stingray. Yes, when I got stung, it felt like I had shards of glass in my foot. I got out of the ocean and was so bloody but so confused I couldn't find any glass. The lifeguard saw me limping and thankfully was able to put me on their truck and get hot water on my foot ASAP. Story 9. Fractured my hip and had to keep rucking 12 miles with 65 pounds on my back. I bawled my eyes out the whole time, and another person was lifting the back of my ruck up to help take the weight off, but it was still the most painful thing I've ever experienced. Note, I wasn't allowed to leave the ruck or drop the weight. My DS said I wouldn't get credit for the ruck and would be recycled if I didn't carry my ruck. Note 2, my company was still using the large MOLLE2 rucks with both side pouches. My dad broke his shoulder while out hunting with my brothers. No cell reception as they were miles out, so he had to drive his four-wheeler back. They each had 1 plus gear. I don't remember why they couldn't leave it and go back, but it probably has something to do with hunting regulations or the property they were on. It took a really long time because he kept passing out from the pain. He has a metal plate in his shoulder now. Similar 20-ish mile road march after stepping in a gopher hole. I thought I pulled my crotch and ended up with an inguinal hernia and lost a foot of intestine during surgery. Not a broken hip, but I collapsed and passed out when we got to the OP. Woke up in the helicopter long enough to scream and pass out. Next was the recovery room where my LT was standing over me deciding what to do. He said I was a tough guy and he's glad I didn't die on the road, and the doc said I was septic when I rolled in. The thing I wasn't going to do was stop and hold up the team. After the Calfex, my team rolled in with all kinds of words and a few beers trying to hit on my nurses. Good times. Story 10. Rheumatoid arthritis. My knees had been so inflamed that I wasn't able to bend them for about a year. Had to learn to use the toilet standing up. Even number 2. Anyway, one day I started to stumble and I caught myself by automatically bending my knee to stabilize and not fall. It was like a gunshot. I passed out and woke up in a puddle of vomit. No idea how long I was out. Thankfully, I was on the carpet and didn't hit my head on the way down. I've had 2 children and I've passed 3 large kidney stones. This pain was beyond all that, but it didn't linger. Worst I ever felt by far, but only for seconds. Yuck. You just broke through all of that nasty inflammation that had been locking you up for a year and stretched every tendon and ligament that hadn't been stretched in all that time, too, all at once. Ooh-wee, that sounds like a nightmare. I've had my fair share of weird aches and pains and strange things. When I was pregnant, I used to wake up in the night with my hands frozen in a claw position, cramps in so many tiny muscles all at once. I would weep and beg for help, but of course, moving them at all would make it more excruciating. So weird, so intense. I think I had that happen in 2 pregnancies. No warning, just out of a dead sleep, fully Charlie horse hands, stiff and contorted, but that sounds absolutely next level. My grandmothers on both sides have arthritis in their hands and knees. I know it's coming for me. I have a broken finger where the bone was never set, and another finger that had surgery on it, and those joints are swollen and weird. Can't imagine a knee. Joint pain, joint scar tissue, inflammation is a uniquely awful feeling. My fiance has rheumatoid arthritis. She's 23, and she said she also learned what the 10 on the pain scale is like. Her rheumatoid is in her fingers, hands and wrists mostly, and it's amazing how many people don't understand that you can't just suck it up with that. On bad days, she's needed me to even buckle her seatbelt for her, or even peel a label off of a sheet. She got diagnosed a little over a year ago and has been put on long-term medication, but it takes months to start feeling like it's working. I wish you luck. It's definitely a horrible disease. Chronic pain is so horrible that people who don't have it just don't understand. I have AS, and before I was diagnosed, I had a flare-up to where I lost my ability to walk unassisted. I could bend my knee knees, but I couldn't lift my leg up and push it forward while balancing on the other because it would make my back move. I had to keep my back in mostly one position. I would crawl or shuffle or lean on things and support myself mostly with my arms. It was painful every day. If I moved wrong in any way, it was like a jolt of immense pain of electricity shooting through my entire body that didn't fade right away. I was at a constant pain level of 4 or 5 while resting, but the most painful day was the day I woke up and had this happen to me, the day before my back was normally sore from work at a factory. Then I woke up at 4:30 a.m. and I couldn't move. I started crying and asking my ex at the time if he could assist me out of bed, and he was yelling at me about how he had to wake up at 5:30 to go to work, and I had to beg him for 5 minutes to get him to hold my hand and pull me up. He went back to sleep pissed off at me. The first day was so painful I didn't know what was happening to me. I had to learn what I could and couldn't do. It took me 45 minutes to get down one flight of stairs and get seated in the kitchen chair. It was horrible. It lasted about 6 months. I was diagnosed with AS only $6,000 worth of doctor visits later. At the time, I was mostly better and healed up. I take Remicade now, and it is seriously a life changer. I haven't had sciatica in about 3 years. Story 11. Kidney stones. Yup. Came here to comment on this. A couple of years ago, I spent an entire month trying to pass a 6mm stone that kept getting stuck along the way down the ureter. That kidney ballooned up pretty big from being blocked for so long. I get my bunk, rock-making baby kidney problems from my mom. When I asked her which was worse between kidney stones or birth, she just looked at me stone-faced and said, "I would honestly rather have fat-headed twins as big as you were, 10-pound birth weight, without an epidural than to ever have to pass a single kidney stone again. Don't wish death on your enemies. Wish large kidney stones on them if you really hate them." Absolutely. Didn't know what it was at the time, but one fine day, all of a sudden it felt like I was shot in the back. The pain was so bad I puked every half hour for about 4 hours, then passed out. Woke up 2 hours later and felt like $1,000,000. The same thing happened the next weekend. Then Monday morning in the shower, I peed a straight stream of blood. Go through the usual BS with ER, get told it's a prostate infection, and here's some antibiotics. Follow up with the GP, he sent me to a urologist. Finally, I found out that a piece of the stone had broken off and got stuck in the ureter. By the time insurance approved surgery, it had all moved into my bladder and was too low for ultrasound, so they had to laser it. Woke up with what felt like a garden hose stuck up on me, the catheter, peed bits of flesh and blood for the rest of the weekend. Screw kidney stones. Yeah, I came here to say that. I actually couldn't rate my own pain. I am autistic and have some issues with processing sensations, so I perceived it as a stomachache and feeling intensely uncomfortable rather than actual pain, but I could still tell something was really wrong. In the ER waiting room with my mom, we were trying to explain how I felt to the triage nurse, and he was just kind of acting like he didn't think it was bad enough to be a big deal. And then my mom was like, she can barely talk, is too uncomfortable to sit still, and has thrown up multiple times while we're waiting. And he kinda, according to my mom, I don't really remember this, got an "oh crap" look and said, "That sounds like severe pain. I'm putting it down as an 8. Turns out I had a 7.5mm, I think, kidney stone. When they finally gave me IV pain meds like 2 or 3 hours in, all the nausea and discomfort went away almost instantly. Had to get it laser blasted about a week later, so I don't know if it was technically at a 9 or not, but it was certainly up there. We went to the ER in the first place because I asked my mom to bring me stomach medicine, and when she got there, I looked so terrible she was seriously worried I had appendicitis or something. Story 12. Hit by a car. My leg got pinned in front of the wheel and it basically ate away my ankle. First sobering moment in my life was when I picked up my leg and my ankle went at a 90-degree angle. I was 9 at the time and knew I had messed up big time. 11 surgeries, 2 months in the hospital, 8 months of bed rest later, I can say I still have my leg. Most of it. Fellow obliterated ankle here, compound pylon fracture, sending some solidarity as to our likely shared experiences of arthritis from the trauma even years on from it. I've very recently had a procedure to shave away the excess bone growth and fix the cartilage damage, and it's a strange feeling to be walking around, walking downstairs, waking up in the morning, etc. without as much background noise. Story 13. Ovarian torsion that lasted 3 days. Also, CSF leak after a spinal tap. Earlier this week, I learned that I had an ovarian torsion years ago. I'm guessing it was the time I went to urgent care with extreme abdominal pain. And after an x-ray, why an x-ray? I don't know, and we don't see anything obviously wrong, they sent me home with Norco and told me to go to the ER if it got worse. The pain eventually resolved over a few days without getting worse. I found out that instead of resolving, my ovary died. Everything on that side of my abdomen was an absolute mess and had been for years. I didn't actually have endometriosis causing near constant pain. Instead, I made multiple surgeons wonder how I was alive. This was my experience as well. I had a cyst burst that resulted in the torsion at 19. They also sent me home with the good old, well, if it isn't your appendix, you'll be okay. Years later, I found out it was my ovary. I'm 33 now. One ovary died over a 2 or 3 day ordeal with just some pain meds and a very scared teenager. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.